In this video, we're going to introduce the idea of testing with Mockito. Let's see why we would want to do this. Here's a UML class diagram with the class that we want to test and all the dependencies for that class. And we can see that if we want to test book service, we're going to need a book repository, book copy, copy status, DTO factory, book DTO, and copy DTO. That's a lot of extra classes just so that we can test book service. So if we were going to test just one method in book service, we would need 4 other classes. Now, all 5 of these classes would need to be written and available for the test to be possible. And that also means that we would have to create objects of 4 other classes, also have a database available, and all of that just to test one method in one class. Ideally, when we're testing a class, we only want to create objects of that class, and then we can use object doubles to mimic the other objects. And that would completely remove the need for real objects of the 4 other classes, and also remove the need for a database. It also removes a lot of dependencies, and therefore the test for book service can focus only on the book service class and not worry about having the other classes available. They might not even be written yet, and that's where Mockito comes in. It's a popular open source framework for using mock objects in Java tests. What's a mock object? Well, it's this concept of an object double. Think of a stunt double in the film industry. An object double is like that. It mimics the real object, and we can use it in place of the real object in a unit test, and it can pretend to provide functionality, which is known as stubbing, in a unit test, and we'll see some examples. When we're using Mockito, we can use some of these static methods. The mock method will create a mock object. So you can see here, we want a book repository, but we're going to mock the book repository class. And that means it doesn't create a real book repository object. It creates this mock object that is going to pretend to be a book repository object. With the when method, we can create a stub for a mock objects method. For example, when mock book repository.findById is called, then return a value. And every time the test calls this method, that result will be returned. So we're calling methods in a mock object, and that mock object will always return the result that we say. With the verify method, we can check expected interaction with mock objects. So we might say, for example, that we want to verify that the mock book repository's findById method has been called exactly once. And that can be important when we're looking at the behavior of an object that we are testing. Or maybe we want to verify that there are no interactions with another object. Now, there are very many more methods available in Mockito, and you should explore the Mockito framework to understand what they do for you. Now, I've just identified 2 different styles of testing with mocks, one of which is to verify state. This is where we perform an action in the test, and then we check that the expected effect on data values has occurred. And so what we're doing is arranging the universe, taking an action, and then we're asserting data values, we're asserting state. Another form of testing is verification of behavior. And this is where we test that the action that is performed has the expected interaction with other objects, and we use mock objects wherever possible for this. And so the approach in that kind of test is to arrange the universe, take some kind of action, and then verify the behavior. If this is the method that we're wanting to test in book service, as we look at the method, we've got to decide what are we going to keep as a real object and what other objects are we going to mock. Now, in book service, we want to limit our testing only to the book service class. Therefore, book repository will need to be mocked. This will remove any interaction with a real database. It means that book repository will pretend to interact with a database, but it doesn't really. Also, we're using a DTO factory down here, and if we provide a mock object for that, it means that we don't have to go off to the real DTO factory. It might mean that the factory isn't even written yet, but that would be okay. We can still test because we're using a mock object for it. And so we could do some kind of state verification in this way. When the book ID exists, we're going to expect to get book details returning a non-null book DTO. That's what we're intending to test. So let's create the universe. Now, this is going to be done by using a mock book repository and a mock DTO factory. We're also stubbing these methods. So find by ID in that mock book repository will return a mock book class. So we're even mocking the return result. Likewise with the DTO factory, we mock the DTO factory and we stub the create DTO method, and that's going to return a mock object as well. Now that we've created that little bit of the universe, we can set up a book service object. This is the class that we're wanting to test in this method. So we use a real book service object and we pass as parameters the two mock objects, which means that when the method that we're testing, in this case getBookDetails, calls any methods in here, the results they get back are going to be the mock results that we set up here. Now that we've finished setting up the universe for the test, we can then perform an action, which in this case is to call the getBookDetails from the real object, which will then make calls to the mock objects and get a result. So finally, we can verify the state of this action by checking the data values in here. In this case, we just want to make sure that result is not null. If we were to verify behavior, our test would look a bit different. In this case, when the book ID exists, we expect that getBookDetails will make one call to book repository find by ID and one call, and the method name disappears off the screenshot here, but we'll see in a minute what we're actually verifying. So here's the mock book repository. We're setting up a stub for find by ID, which is what we did in the other example when we were verifying state. We're creating a mock DTO factory, but we're not really interested in setting up a stub for this particular test. So we're not going to create a stub, we just stay with the mock object. Create the real book service object, passing references to the two mock objects, and perform an action. So this is the same action as we performed in the state verification, but we're no longer interested in the result. We're interested in its behavior, and therefore we can now verify for the mock book repository that find by ID was called exactly one time. And we can also verify that the mock DTO factory's create DTO method was called exactly one time. Now these verify methods will pass if this condition is true and fail otherwise. And we have two verifications going on here. So if both of them pass, then the test will pass. Otherwise, the test will fail. When we're writing JUnit tests with Mockito, we need to identify the class that we're testing and not mock it. We're testing the real object. For any of the dependencies, we will use mock objects for as many of those other classes as we possibly can. We also need to decide which of the methods for those mock objects should be stubbed and which mock objects can be left as mocks without stubs. We also need to decide on our testing style. Are we interested only in verifying state or only verifying behavior or both? In which case you would probably have two different methods for the same action, one to verify state and one to verify behavior. You can see some examples of JUnit tests and the use of Mockito in the JUnit demo project that you can download by following the link in the description. Now, I've only scratched the surface of Mockito and other test frameworks, so please take some time to do some additional reading on these things.